Hey guys, welcome back to Primer Podcast. We're in week 4 of Under the Influence. My name is Jessica Flake, and we are here with our pastor of spiritual formation, Phil Anderson. So we are so welcome and so excited to welcome you
Thanks,
this
Jessica.
week. And so, how's your week been?
Oh, it's been a kind of bumpy ride. I've had this sinus thing that just about everyone else in town has, and
Yeah,
that's been bothersome.
sorry. I hate
But
to-
other than that, I was out of town a few days and got to be with some good friends and get some rest, which I needed.
Yeah.
So that was good.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, we've been just diving into First Peter, and he talks a lot about being sober-minded and what that looks like in our lives, and really been able to focus a little more on God, and so we're going to dive straight into this week's.
Let's go for it.
Yeah. So 1 Peter 5, we're going to read the verses 5 through 9. And it's, all of you, clothe yourselves with humility toward one another, because God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxiety on him, because he cares for you. Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. Resist him, standing firm in the faith. I think after these several weeks, I've thought differently about the word sober, and Peter really he focuses on that a lot in this book, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think it's always really important to consider the context. I mean, this is a letter that Peter was writing to folks who were living in some pretty harsh circumstances, and it's an interesting word for him to use because their context was very sober. It was a dangerous time for Christ followers, and his attention that he gives to the evil presence in the world, I think, is what's driving that the use of that word sober.
Yeah.
It is rather sobering to think that we've got a target on our back.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that humble yourself, and what that looks like in going to God, and how we can respond, just not only to him, but also those around us.
Yeah. Again, I think considering the context, humility was the last thing on the minds of the people in that culture. Humility was seen as ridiculous, weak, and I think Peter does a remarkable job of kind of reframing humility. And of course, Jesus is the supreme example of humility, and proves by the way he lived that he was the farthest thing from weak, like folks tend to think about humility. Mm-hmm. I also found myself, I've been sitting with this passage for several weeks, and I found myself wondering what was going on in Peter's mind, particularly with regard to his memory of the days when he was following Jesus. Because I think Peter, like myself, had struggled a lot with pride. Mm-hmm. And I think that's some of what must have attracted him to Jesus, because Jesus was such a great example of someone with great strength, but also remarkable humility.
Yeah. How have you experienced humility in your own life?
Humiliation or humility?
Well, I think they kind of go hand in hand sometimes.
Sometimes humiliation leads to humility. I I have really struggled with pride. It's an amazing thing to me. When I see it, I despise it. And I think some of the reason for my visceral kind of reaction to pride is because it's like looking in the mirror and seeing what I think is perhaps the ugliest thing about me sometimes. And so I think I've probably learned humility the hard way more often than I've rationally chosen it, which is really unfortunate because when when my focus, as Peter helps us with in this passage, when my focus is on God, who is like no one else in the world, in power, in knowledge, in love, the list goes on. It's very humbling. And so I think humility is really kind of a common sense thing.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense when you're focused on God.
Yeah. In the past weeks, I've talked a little bit about my control issues.
You?
And I have, yeah, we've talked about that several times off screen. And so how my planning is part of my pride. And
Yeah.
so like because I want to prepare and I want to look to others like I can get it done, I can do everything and that like you said it's that prideful part of me. And I've fasted from planning this last few weeks. And I was telling Pete last week that I can already see my focus switching to prayer and being like I'm not saying that my brain's not thinking about planning, right? So like, but what I've realized is that when I start thinking about something that I know is taking away my focus from God, it because I'm trying to fast from it, I'm realizing to refocus back on God, and that's allowing myself to pray like we learned about last week, and that's really made a difference in what trying to humble myself a little bit more and realize that pride can get in the way of my relationship with Christ.
Yeah. That's really interesting to me because your gift, your strong ability to plan well is a good thing.
Sometimes, yeah.
When does it go sideways? When does this good thing become a bad thing?
When that's all I'm focused on.
Okay. Yes. Yes. So I think my struggle with pride has often been a result of good things in my life, but I began to get focused on me and the image that doing good things can sometimes promote. And, people start to say kind things about how we are and what we do. And you begin to realize, oh, this has gained me some attention. And I think humility puts the focus back on Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what we should be doing is reminding ourselves that even though it may be our nature, our human nature, to be prideful and but our focus needs to be on God for His will to be
Yeah.
done,
Yeah.
and for us to be thinking of kingdom things instead of worldly things.
Yeah. All of this gets more difficult when we factor in the fact that there is an evil force in the world. We do have a target on our backs, and I've never really liked to talk that much about Satan.
Right.
I think some of the reason is I think sometimes he gets more credit than is deserved. But I think one of the worst mistakes I've ever made is to ignore or or perhaps even deny that there is this horrible force, this evil force in the world that is looking for a way to take us down.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that we were talking earlier about how sometimes in society we think of the devil as, the pointy,
Right.
little
Yeah.
figure that has its demons running around, and
Yeah.
yet ultimately it's a lot of times the evilness of his nature is actually in actions
Yeah.
from us.
Yeah. I found it fascinating in this passage. He refers to Satan as being like a lion who's looking for an opportunity to devour us. And so often in Scripture, lions are used to reflect something quite different. But again, given the context, there were people who were reading or listening to Peter's letter who had probably seen human blood dripping from the mouths of lions because there was persecution. And for him to present this warning about Satan's power using the image of a lion just suggests all kinds of things about how alert and sober-minded we do need to be. Because, lions are very stealth. They're sneaky. They love to stalk, and they love to pounce when least expected.
Yeah.
And I've had an experience or two.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, and a lot of times it comes out of nowhere. Like it's like you said, it's in the middle of the night. The lion attacks in the middle of the night, and where the zebra or whatever gazelle he's after is unexpected.
Yeah.
And so that sober-mindedness of being able to, I think of the sober-mindedness now of being able to have that cloud of whatever it is that's taking away your focus from God, having that lifted, and being able to be clear-minded, and so like so many times we think about sober as not drunk,
Right.
but then it's the cloudiness of your mind that gets in the way of the actions that you should take in your relationship with Christ. And if you're focused on you being in control, me being in control, that takes away and it clouds my judgment of God's in control.
Yes.
And my pride's getting in the way.
Yeah. I mentioned this earlier. I'll go back to the thought. As I was sitting with this passage, I found myself wondering again, what kind of memories were in Peter's heart and mind when he was writing this letter? Because so much of what he warns against come really out of his own experience. I mean, I think about the upper room and how Jesus predicted that he was going to deny him. And Peter, in his arrogance, says, he throws the other guys under the bus. He says, these guys might, but I would never do that. And golly, no wonder he has so much passion to warn us about how things can go when we think we would never do that.
Mm-hmm.
We're probably on thin ice at that point.
Yeah.
Because the evil one sees that arrogance and he says,
mm-hmm.
I've got them right where I like for them to be.
Yeah, and it never fails. It's like when you feel like you have something under control.
Yeah.
You might have, maybe the greed, whatever you struggled with, years ago. Now it's pride.
Yeah.
Well, next year it may be something else.
This control thing is such an illusion. When I think about what I actually control, it's a short list.
Right.
Like there's nothing on it.
Mm-hmm.
We're just not in control.
Yeah.
It's good to know that the God who is in control is such a loving, kind, caring God who is crazy about us and wants nothing but the very best for us. And this passage has really been reminding me in some great ways about that reality.
Yeah, me too. And that really the whole series has just been.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
Great. Yeah.
I hope the needles moved a little bit in my life, and maybe I've become a little more like Jesus.
Yeah. Well, I am excited to dig deeper into this passage, and thank you so much for sharing, and I'm excited to learn more about what Peter's teachings are for us. So, guys, we hope that you check out the study guide questions in the link below, and we hope you have a great week. See ya.
See ya.